Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast and our ongoing America's Founding series. I'm your host, Nick Giordano. Make sure that you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with your family and friends. Share it on your social media. Today, I want to talk about someone who has a remarkable story to tell. We often think we know the story of American independence. There are a few names we're all familiar with, like Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. We hear about some iconic battles like the Battle of Saratoga or the Battle of Yorktown. We talk about the lofty ideals of the Revolution, the fight for independence. But what if I told you that a crucial early acknowledgement of this new fledgling nation, even the very name United States, found one of its first champions not in Philadelphia, but in the humid, vibrant port of Spanish New Orleans? Its advocate wasn't a Minuteman, it wasn't a founding father, but a Spanish governor, Luis de Unzaga. Today, we're not just talking about America, we're asking the question, how did the United States get its name? I'm not talking about the America part, I'm just talking about United States. And believe it or not, one of the earliest known uses of United States came from people that most Americans aren't familiar with. It wasn't from Thomas Jefferson or John Adams, but from the Spanish governor writing from New Orleans. And we're going to uncover the story of a man who, while he wasn't an American, he was a patriot. And he played a pivotal and often overlooked role in the Patriot cause for independence. This isn't just a story of logistics and gunpowder. It's a human story. A story of risk, of foresight, a story of complex motives that shaped a revolution. And so who is this man, Luis de Unzaga? The name doesn't ring many bells. He's not well known like Lafayette or von Steuben, but his impact on the United States would be profound. This is a guy that was born into a P.A.S. family in Spain. He was a seasoned military officer. He was a seasoned administrator. He arrived in Louisiana in 1769. And he wouldn't serve as governor yet, but he served alongside Alejandro O'Reilly, who had become known as someone that would brutally suppress the French Creole rebellion against Spanish rule. And O'Reilly earned himself the nickname Bloody O'Reilly. But Unzaga, who would become governor in late 1769, he earned a different nickname. His nickname was the Conciliator, and this tells us something vital about the man. He wasn't a firebrand. He was a pragmatist. He was a diplomat. He understood that ruling this area was extremely difficult because it was so diverse, and you had a resentful population. So he knew that you have to have a delicate balance. It required a softer touch than Bloody O'Reilly. He ended up actually marrying a local French Creole, and he integrated himself into the fabric of Louisiana society. He even promoted a bilingual public education system in both Spanish and French. So this was a man who actually looked for common ground. He understood the power of subtle influence over brute force. And imagine him in New Orleans. I mean, this is a city at the time. You had French, you had Spanish, Acadian, German, African, Native American. It was a bustling port city, a nexus of trade, hotbed of information and intrigue where people would chatter. So from his vantage point, Unzaga is watching the storm clouds of rebellion gathering over Britain's 13 colonies to the northeast. And as whispers of colonial unrest grew into shouts of rebellion, I wonder what Unzaga was thinking at the time. You know, Spain and Great Britain, they were old rivals. You had the Treaty of Paris in 1763. This ended the 7-Year War, but it was a bitter pill for Spain. They had to cede Florida to the British in order to get back the territories of Cuba and the Philippines. The idea of Britain, this global superpower, weakened by internal revolt, was something that would be music to the King of Spain's ears, right? King Charles III, his ministers, they would love to see a revolt. And Unzaga was a loyal servant to the crown. He saw the strategic advantage for Spain, but he also understood it was a dangerous game. Spain wasn't ready to help the colonists in the way we wanted, because if it became known that they would help the colonists, they would become embroiled in the war too. And Spain wasn't ready for the war with Britain. Any support had to be covert. Spain had to be able to deny that they were providing any type of support. And if Unzaga acted too overtly, he risked embroiling Spain in a premature conflict where the outcome was far from certain. If he failed, he is going to pay a very, very heavy price. And the British at this time, they have eyes and ears everywhere. So what was Unzaga's motives? Why did he decide to help the Patriot cause for independence? We don't necessarily know. We know that Spanish interests played a role. He saw an opportunity to chip away at British dominance, but perhaps he also saw an economic opening for Louisiana, a chance to foster trade with these increasingly independent-minded colonies free from British mercantilist restrictions. And the bigger question is, did he actually personally sympathize with the colonists' cries for liberty? And that's harder to say, because he was a monarchist. He was a man of order. He believed in the monarchy, but he also was a pragmatist, and he respected the colonists' tenacity. He certainly saw their potential, despite the Continental Army consisting of a bunch of ragtag farmers as opposed to highly trained soldiers. And think about it logically. He had faith that we could actually win this revolution when most did not. His early actions were cautious, but they were telling, because he allowed relatively free trade and he turned a blind eye to colonial ships coming into the port of New Orleans. He started to gather intelligence for the colonists, and he understood the depths, the importance of this rebellion. He was preparing, he was waiting for the opportune time, the opportune moment to act more decisively, yet he was operating behind the shadows. And what's even more remarkable is that this patriot wasn't a colonist. He was a Spaniard. He wasn't an American, but he played a vital role in giving us a chance to secure our independence. He had faith in the birth of this new nation, and he even influenced the name. The moment is going to arrive where we're going to have to directly reach out to Unzaga with direct pleas for help. Men like Patrick Henry of Virginia, give me liberty and give me death. General Charles Lee reached out to him. And we were desperate for supplies. We needed supplies, especially gunpowder. And this is where Unzaga decides he's going to take a calculated risk. In the summer of 1776, it's going to be a pivotal year. You have the Declaration of Independence being written, ultimately going to be signed and sent off to Britain. And he's going to secretly authorize the delivery of 5 tons of gunpowder from the King's own stores to Captain George Gibson and Lieutenant Lynn of the Virginia Council of Defense. And he did this without the explicit approval and authorization from the Spanish king. So if he gets caught, he's done. He's going to be in a lot of trouble. This cargo is going to be moved stealthily up the Mississippi under the Spanish flag because they had to avoid British detection. Ultimately, it's going to be destined for Fort Pitt. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture by Unzaga to help the American patriots. This was tangible aid that's now going to directly impact the American Revolution all-war effort. And this would help the colonists thwart British plans to capture Fort Pitt. And it was successful. But Unzaga did something else, something that resonates even more with our central question today. In his correspondence, so he constantly wrote and exchanged correspondence with General Lee, and it was noted by General Washington. A letter was sent, and General Washington's aides actually read the letter. When they read the letter, Unzaga didn't refer to the Patriots as rebels. He didn't refer to the colonists as colonists or insurgents. He addressed his letters to the General of the United States of America. Now think about that. This is 1776. The ink on the Declaration of Independence is barely dry. The colonies were a loose, often fractious confederation. There was no guarantee we were going to win this war. In fact, the odds were against us. We were losing battle after battle. And yet here was the Spanish governor, an official of a major European power, using a term that implied unity, sovereignty, but most importantly, implied a sense of nationhood. He wasn't just sending gunpowder. He was sending a message. He was not acknowledging them not as a collection of rebellious colonies, but as the United States. And George Washington would see this title in the letter, and he liked it. He reportedly liked it so much that he stated, quote, "This is a tolerable step towards declaring himself our ally." That Unzaga would recognize the importance of what's going on in this moment of time. And Washington recognizes the significance of this foreign official bestowing such a title of him, the General of the United States of America. Now, what was Unzaga thinking when he penned these words? Was it by accident? When Unzaga used that title, was it diplomatic recognition, a calculated signal, pragmatic foresight? Whatever the reason, it was no accident. Maybe it was a combination of all three. But Unzaga was a man of precise language, and this title was a powerful statement. It suggested that Spain, or at least the Spanish Governor of Louisiana, saw the future of America, saw the promise of America. And Unzaga's support didn't end there. He continued to facilitate aid. He worked closely with Oliver Pollock. Maybe a future episode. Oliver Pollock was a vital American agent and patriot in New Orleans that would transmit messages. He allowed American merchants to use the port for safe haven. And Unzaga was also running covert aid operations to the colonists. He would capture British intelligence and transmit it to us. The risks were constant, and if his connection was uncovered, if it was discovered, it would have been disastrous. So he had to navigate a treacherous diplomatic tightrope. At the same time, reports show his health was beginning to fail during this period. He was losing his eyesight. And imagine the personal stress. You're managing a vast colony yourself in Spanish Louisiana. You're orchestrating secret aid to a revolution where victory was anything but certain. And at the same time, you're battling your own physical ailments. Truly remarkable. And what was his true opinion of these American colonists? What was his opinion of this quest for independence? Obviously, his loyalties lied with Spain, and he was motivated by Spain's strategic interest. But his actions suggest that he had an admiration for what was taking place at the time. He saw the colonies as a force to be reckoned with, but he also saw them as a potential future partner. He saw the United States as a new piece on the complex chessboard that makes up the world stage. So he wasn't an American patriot in the way of Thomas Paine or Samuel Adams were. He wasn't a Paul Revere, but he was a Spanish patriot. And in a fascinating intersection of interests, his patriotism aligned with the American cause. To put it plain and simply, he was an American ally for the cause of independence and recognized our struggle and the emergent American identity. And his impact was significant. The gunpowder he supplied was critical. His willingness to engage and acknowledge the United States provided an early and subtle form of international legitimacy. And he laid the groundwork for his successor, the more overtly famous Bernardo de Galvez, who would later lead Spanish forces in direct military campaigns against the British along the Gulf Coast. Even after Unzaga left Louisiana in 1777 to become the Captain General of Venezuela, and then ultimately later Cuba, he continued to correspond, and he continued to respond to requests for aid from General Washington and Robert Morris, who I spoke about last week. He was committed to the patriot cause for independence. And so why is Luis Unzaga not a household name in the story of the American Revolution? Perhaps because his contributions were covert. Maybe it's because he's been overshadowed by later, more public Spanish military involvement of Bernardo de Galvez. Or maybe it's because we've dumbed things down so much and tried to oversimplify our history to the point where most Americans don't have a clue about the real history of the United States. But Unzaga's story is a vital reminder that the American Revolution was an international affair. It drew in a complex web of alliances, rivalries, diverse cast of characters. And Unzaga, the Spanish governor of Louisiana, the conciliator, was more than just a supplier of arms. He was an early, cautious, but crucial supporter of the American Revolution. He risked his life, his position, and Spain's neutrality to provide us this aid. Most remarkably, he was among the very first influential figures to acknowledge the colonists not merely as rebels, but as the United States of America. So he didn't just help fuel a revolution, he helped to name it, to give a new nation its identity on the world stage long before many were willing to do so. And his actions were a testament to his foresight, his diplomatic acumen, and his understanding that the world has now changed forever. He had a belief that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that we would be able to shape our own destiny. And Luis de Unzaga may not have signed the Declaration of Independence, but in his own way, he certainly lived it. It's stories like these that remind us who we are as a people. And if you found the content of this episode informative, please take 30 seconds to write a good review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on any podcast platform that will allow it. And I want to thank you for joining me today. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the America's Founding series. And I'll be back next week with more great episodes of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.